Well, we've reached over 1,000 people, so we're happy to see so much participation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Teresa Mental, and I'm the Interim Vice Chancellor for Public and Government Affairs. I want to thank everybody who's joining us today, and I also want to thank every one of you who submitted questions in advance. We will be addressing those at the beginning portion of the program and then get to the live Q&A a little bit later. This is a program that is brought to us by our Chancellor, Michael Amiridis, and I'd like to welcome the Chancellor to make some opening remarks. Thank you, and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I think I can say with confidence that for the large majority of us, this year will remain in our collective memory as the worst in our lifetimes, and we are not even through June yet. We have experienced a sequence of crises, including the worst pandemic since the Spanish flu, which has claimed the lives of 6 members of our UIC community, the most rapid and highest unemployment rates since the Great Depression, which has affected our students and, for some of us, our families, our friends, and our neighbors, and the murder of George Floyd, another African American killed by individuals who are expected to protect us. I know that watching the detrimental effects of the last 3 months has created despair, pain, and anger among all of us. All of these crises have hit hardest the Black and brown communities of Chicago, of which many of our UIC family members are a part and which we are determined as an institution to serve and support. During the course of its history, UIC has been committed to addressing injustice and disparities in every aspect of our lives: education, healthcare, economic opportunity, and the judicial system. Now, more than ever, it is critical for us to execute our mission. It is critical to continue to offer our educational, clinical care, research, and engagement services at the highest levels of excellence, because they are needed now much more than before. On behalf of the entire leadership team, I want to express our gratitude to all of you for your remarkable efforts over the last 3 months. While everyone was adjusting to new and very challenging conditions, and while we were addressing unprecedented measures that had to be taken for the protection of the health and safety of our community and everyone else around us, you succeeded in delivering the highest quality healthcare, treating patients at the hospital, in the clinics, and throughout the city through Miles Square. You saved hundreds of lives, while at the same time you expanded access to testing and to care in some of the city's more vulnerable areas. You succeeded in transferring the entire university curriculum to a remote platform, giving the opportunity to our students to complete the semester, and some of them graduate, or alternatively, continue their progress towards their degrees. You did everything possible to take care of our students' needs, whether these were the needs of the hundreds of students who remained in the residence halls because they had no other place to go, or the IT needs of the students who went to a home environment without access to the network, or the academic support needs of the students who struggled in the courses away from the campus, or the health and social support needs of students who were isolated from their friends and classmates. I know that student affairs, the cultural centers, and individual faculty members made every effort to maintain social connections while we were physically at a distance. And finally, you succeeded in getting fast help to address the financial needs of the students who themselves or their parents lost their jobs and urgently needed the CARES Act funds that we distributed. You succeeded in the research arena, as we participated in a number of major clinical trials, from the use of remdesivir, which now represents the new standard of care for COVID-19, to the use of IL-6 inhibitors and statins, which are still ongoing, to the testing of the most promising new vaccine, which is going to start here at our hospital next month. And you succeeded in supporting the state and the city in their efforts to fight the pandemic when it came to public health decisions and policy. I'm very proud of everything that you have done for our students, everything that you have done for our patients, for our surrounding communities, for Chicago, and for Illinois. I wish I could tell you today that now we can all take a well-deserved break, enjoy the summer. I wish I was going to go to Greece and see my family and friends, and then come back for a regular semester in the fall. Unfortunately, this is a fantasy. I'm afraid that as we move today in phase 3 of Illinois' road to recovery from COVID-19, there are many challenges remaining and a lot of work that needs to be done at many different levels. A return to campus has to be done carefully and in phases. The most important change that we will experience at UIC during phase 3, which starts right now actually, will be the gradual reopening of the majority of our research labs and the return of a number of graduate students to campus. At the same time, UA Health will also continue to gradually increase access to clinical care for non-COVID-19 related cases. And finally, a significant number of professional students in the health sciences will also return to campus for courses that cannot be taught remotely, specifically clinical experiences. The majority of staff members and faculty who are not involved in the activities that I just mentioned will continue to work remotely from home during phase 3. The Campus Operations Task Force, led by John Coronado, and the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research have provided guidelines for health and safety protocols that individual research labs have to develop. These protocols have to be reviewed and approved before these labs can resume their operations, and we already have made significant progress in this area. Furthermore, each building that houses a lab will also have to meet certain health and safety standards in order to reopen. Finally, general campus requirements have been established for faculty, students, and staff returning to campus during phase 3. These include physical distancing and limits in the numbers of individuals in the same area, mandatory use of masks by all, which we will be providing by the university, and daily self-monitoring of temperature, new sanitation protocols, and also triaging for COVID-19 testing and contact tracing if any positive cases are detected. We're also preparing for phase 4 this fall, which, if everything goes well, will include the return of the majority of our students to campus, including undergraduate students. Our UIC students are sending us the same message that is heard across the country. They really want to return to campus. We also want them to come back, since for years now, we have been asking them to stay on campus, to continue to learn outside the classrooms and the labs, to get engaged and to participate, so they can get a full benefit of the university experience. Of course, we have to balance these desires and these urges that we feel with our obligation to protect the health and safety of all of us. As a large urban campus, we face more challenges in this respect than other large universities located in much smaller cities. Our physical footprint is smaller. We have vertical structures that add to the complexity, and as a result, the density of people per square foot is higher. We also rely on public transportation, since many of our community members, staff, faculty, and students travel significant distances every day to come to campus. At this point, we have not figured all the details about the fall. For sure, we expect that the same measures that I explained a couple of minutes ago for phase 3 will also be applied during phase 4. However, as technology continues to evolve rapidly, especially in the areas of testing and contact tracing, I can tell you, I get contacted 2 or 3 times a day with new innovations in this area. It is possible or even likely that these plans will be revised and expanded by August. Our physical infrastructure will determine the number of classes that can be taught in person, given the physical distancing requirements we expect to continue having. The rest of the classes, including all large lecture classes, will have to be taught online. The Academic Planning Task Force, led by the Provost, has made significant progress to ensure that we have as many classes as we safely can on campus, to ensure that the faculty are provided resources to create their online classes and to build community within those classes, and to ensure that the student's perspective is considered in all our planning. As the leading urban research university in the country, UIC has a challenge and an obligation to deliver the national standard of excellence in this hybrid education. Most of the universities will follow this hybrid style. This is not my decision, it is a recommendation from the Provost to really represent the national standard of excellence. The task force has been working to operationalize it, and I have enthusiastically accepted it and embraced it. I'm very thankful for the tremendous efforts of hundreds of faculty and staff members involved in the preparation for this challenge during the summer. We have hired approximately 100 graduate students to assist in the development of high-quality online courses, and we are also ready now to provide some financial support to the faculty members involved. Finally, I want to point out that students who choose to remain away from campus for various reasons, international students who cannot re-enter the country, students with underlying health conditions, or students living with family members with such conditions, will have the opportunity to make progress towards the degree as well. To achieve this, we will make sure that each course taught in person, maybe with the exception of some labs, will also be available remotely. When we reach phase 4, we will ask the majority of faculty and staff to come back to campus as well. Of course, we will provide the option for those who are at higher risk for severe illness due to COVID-19 to request, if they desire, of course, special accommodations and continue to work remotely. Furthermore, to reduce the density on campus, we will encourage each unit to consider alternative plans, including rotations of staff members working on campus and remotely, as long as these plans do not negatively impact the ability of each unit to fulfill its mission. There is no doubt that the COVID-19 pandemic will create a serious financial crisis for higher education as a whole. Unlike previous financial crises that many of us faced in our careers, and more recently in 2001, 2008, or 2016 here in Illinois, the current situation threatens all streams of revenue for the universities, and UIC is not immune to these effects. We are concerned about the state appropriations. The General Assembly has approved a flat budget for FY21, but has left the option open for the governor to request reductions if the state revenues are significantly decreased, which is expected. We are concerned about the tuition revenue, which is directly related to enrollments. The current ITE, and ITE stands for intent to enroll, the intent to enroll responses for the freshman class is trailing last year's numbers by 10 to 15%, which we believe is directly related to the financial challenges that prospective students and their families are facing. We also anticipate a significant decrease in new international students, especially in undergraduate and master's programs, since visa approvals and travel arrangements are basically at a standstill right now, and we don't know if the students will be satisfied to take online courses. We are concerned about the revenue of our auxiliary units due to necessary decreases in the number of students in the residence halls to achieve physical distancing, as well as lost revenue from parking and numerous large events taking place in our facilities for which we receive rent. And finally, we're concerned about the loss of clinical revenue, which supports our faculty salaries in medicine, dentistry, and the other health science colleges. Added all together, the potential reductions in our revenue for the current and next fiscal year can easily exceed 100 to 150 million, which represents a significant percentage of our operating budget. Yesterday, we issued a statement for the entire University of Illinois system, which includes a set of measures that will help control the expenses over the next few months. These include a significant reduction in the number of new and replacement hires, with the exception, of course, of position in critical areas, which includes the hospital and the clinics, a significant reduction in travel and related expenses, an effort to control non-personnel expenses, supplies, equipment, and other purchases, a delay in capital projects, with the exception of projects funded by private funds that cannot be used for any other purpose, such as the outpatient surgery center, the postponement of a salary program for the next fiscal year, and the implementation of voluntary salary reductions for all the vice chancellors and myself. Whether these measures are enough to address the potential revenue losses will not be known until we have better estimates during the summer and the early fall. We have asked each academic unit and each administrative unit to prepare contingency plans for 7 and 10% reduction in their budgets for the next fiscal year. We have also allowed the units to use their cash reserves to cover part of these reductions, although this is just a temporary measure that cannot be used more than 1 year or a year and a half, while the financial effects of the crisis we are facing may last longer. We plan to do the same, by the way, and use central reserves as well as a temporary measure to offset losses in revenue for the entire university budget and lessen the burden on the units. Finally, under these anticipated conditions, I'm concerned about the effectiveness of our decentralized budget model and have asked our financial team to tell me the effects of a temporary suspension of this model during the continuing crisis. For 3 months, we have been navigating through uncharted waters, and it should be obvious by now that I don't believe that we are near the end of this challenge, but I hope that at least we are approaching the end of the beginning. While our lives and our work have changed dramatically this spring, the mission of UIC, the fabric and the values of our community, and the importance and impact of our work have not changed. If anything, they have become even more relevant, more important, and more desirable. And once again, we have proven that as a community we are resilient and we know how to roll up our sleeves and face challenges head on. It is this character of UIC that gives me great confidence and pride and makes me optimistic that we will emerge from yet another crisis stronger than before, as we have done in the recent past. I'm sure that every one of you is ready to contribute to solutions, and all of us that you see on the screen are ready and eager to hear your comments and answer your questions this afternoon. After all, we want this to be a dialogue. Once again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your attention.
Chancellor, that was a great overview, and you touched on many of the key topics that we received in the advanced questions from people. And I see that our faculty and staff are also submitting questions via the live Q&A. Thank you for that, and we will get to those momentarily. I did want to take an opportunity to address some of the additional detail in some of our broad topics. And I'd like to start with testing and recovery, since that seems to be a dominant theme. We have with us today Dr. Barish, and Dr. Barish has been our expert and go-to on all questions that's related to testing. And I'd wonder, Dr. Barish, if you could address for us what's going on with current testing efforts for phase 3 and what you see might be happening in the fall.
Sure. Thanks, Teresa. And as the Chancellor mentioned in his opening remarks, this is a question that we're all thinking about daily as we go forward. So let me just highlight where we've been and what we're doing now and some of the thoughts that we have for the fall. So since March, we have done over 16,000 tests for COVID-19. How are we using this? We're using it primarily to take care of patients or to tell those patients who appear relatively not ill that they can basically quarantine at home and take care of themselves. So it's pretty much being used in the clinical setting. We're really fortunate that we have a number of centers throughout the city of Chicago where we have drive-through testing at our Mile Square testing, not only in our main Mile Square site, but on our South Shore site. And by the way, for those on the call, zip code 60649, where we have our South Shore clinic, has the worst mortality in the city of Chicago and has a positivity rate of about 21% for those that we are testing. So that's what we're doing now, and we continue to do so. and we continue to expand testing in the Pilsen area, and pretty soon we will be expanding in Cicero as well. What about, you've heard all about these antibody testing. Do we do antibody testing? And I'm pleased to say that we do antibody testing at UI Health. And to date, we've tested over 5,000 people for antibodies. Now, why are we doing this? Why are we doing antibody tests, and what does it mean? So antibody test basically says that at some time in the past, you've been exposed to the disease. Maybe 14 days or 21 days. It generally takes at least 14 days to 21 days for this test to turn positive. We're doing it so that we kind of understand, well, what is the prevalence in the community? And we're learning that about 6%, 6.4% prevalence in the community. But we're doing it for another reason, because those who have high titers, we call them super producers, can then potentially donate their plasma to those patients who are very, very ill, very sick. And it's shown that this is a potentially life-saving type of therapy going forward. So we are very, very pleased that they can be a part of our protocols. And what does a test mean if you're positive? What does it mean? Or if you're negative? So if you're negative, it just means you're negative at that point in time. Within 2 hours, you could be positive. Early on in the disease, you could be negative for COVID-19. So if you're negative today and you were to travel or to be exposed in some other area, you may be positive later. So we just want to make sure that people know that it's only you're negative for that point in time. And eventually, over the course of the disease, eventually you do turn negative, generally over a period of time after you've had the disease. So getting back to the antibodies, what does that mean? Well, nobody across the country is quite sure what that means. What does the level of antibody protection mean? How long does it last? These are the things that we're studying going forward, and we'll learn along the way. So I think the most important thing that I can tell people on this call is what we learned from the Lancet article June 1st. We know that 1 meter or 3 feet may be somewhat protective, but 6 feet is much more protective. So physical distancing of 6 feet, wearing a mask, washing your hands are the most important thing that you can do going forward. But the physical distancing part is really, really key. Now, what has the Chancellor done about testing and contact tracing? Well, he's put together a blue ribbon panel of multidisciplinary experts to look at this issue, including our experts in infectious disease. And they will be making their recommendations as they meet. And as the Chancellor mentioned, this is a fluid situation. So not only are we looking at what we're doing now, but what do we need to do going forward? People have talked about smart testing, like the University of Minnesota. Do we use a cohort to find out how prevalent the disease is in the community? These are some of the things that they will be recommending at the end of their report. And as the Chancellor mentioned, we'll be looking at technology. The technology is changing very, very rapidly. Will there be a saliva test? Will there be the type of test when you go see your physician and you get a strep test that is rapid, but is FDA approved? Many, many of these things we'll know going forward. And that's what the committee is going to address, including contact tracing. Finally, I would like to highlight what the Chancellor talked about. We're so proud and pleased at UIC and UI Health that we will be the first hospital in the city of Chicago to be part of the vaccine trial beginning in July and hopefully ending in December. And this will be a nationwide trial of hopefully 30,000 people that will help us determine if this particular vaccine will be helpful going forward. And since I have you on my soapbox, I want to mention to everybody, please get the flu shot. We have ordered 60,000 flu shots because if COVID-19 rears its head again in the fall and you have the flu and potentially COVID-19, it'll be very, very helpful to your physicians, your providers, to know what is what. So we are going to recommend, highly recommend, that everybody get their flu shot when it comes about in the fall. Thank you, Teresa.
That was great. Thank you so much for that information. And the companion to the questions about testing is really the overall recovery plan. So we have Vice Chancellor John Coronado with us. The Chancellor covered quite a few pieces, John, but I know there's some additional detail that people are asking about. For example, will guidance and protocols come from us, or will each department be responsible? Another question is, can we access our campus offices now? So let's start with those, and then we'll get into some of the other questions.
Sure. Thank you, Teresa, and good afternoon, everyone. I think it's fair to say that the guidance, you can expect the guidance to come from your department. It was centrally developed by a group of our safety experts with input from our infectious disease and public health personnel. But the guidance is largely consistent with that provided through the Restore Illinois Recovery Plan for Phase 3, along with everything that the CDC and IDPH is putting out when we talk about returning to workspaces. So what we did is we asked the research community, since we're specifically talking about bringing back resumption of research in Phase 3, and for the graduate student populations to look at their operations and make sure that it was consistent with everything that was being published. And we provided them some general guidance to make sure that the building would be safe for our workforce to come back to the operations. As you may know, we still had a pretty robust workforce on the campus, taking care of the usual business, especially in support of the hospital and other critical operations. And so none of the buildings were truly completely shut down. We still had our engineers exercising the mechanical systems and testing the water systems to make sure that everything would be safe and functional. But we are asking that the specific departments, since they are most familiar with the work measures in a given place, to make sure they think about, where hand sanitizer needs to be placed, where signage needs to be placed, making sure that it's clear and understandable to every employee coming back to the workspace as to what PPE they would be required to wear, whether it's just a surgical mask or if they need additional PPE which would be provided to our employees.
Great.
And then you also asked, can everyone access? The answer is no. We really want to keep the bulk of our workforce off the campus. If there is a urgent and compelling need to come to campus, that should be run through your department head and ultimately decided by a dean or a vice chancellor to authorize that return to campus, whether it's for a specific situation or for a ongoing work situation. Thank you.
Oh, great, thank you. Sticking with Phase 3 for a moment, there is a clarifying question with regard to research, and that is, are visitors or volunteers going to be allowed? So John, or you or Dr. Groden might be able to answer that one.
I'll pass that on to Dr. Groden. Thank you.
Great, wonderful. Welcome from research. As our labs open, some this week and more on Monday, we have some guidelines about who can be in a lab at one time. You've learned about some of those already. Visitors, friends, family members will not be permitted in our laboratories and are never permitted there in order to keep them safe. We will be open to volunteers. Some may be students. And in some research areas, these may include human subjects, volunteers who are participating in research studies. And so we'll have developing guidance for introducing some of these volunteers. But for the time being, we will use registration of everyone within each laboratory group in BioRaft and the completion of the COVID-19 checklist as well, to ensure that everyone who comes into our buildings and into our research laboratories understands risks and risk mitigation in order to prevent infection, or also the practice of safe laboratory practices as well within each research group.
Great, thank you, Joanna. John, how about if we move on now to what it's going to look like for the next phase, and that is getting back to campus. There's a lot of questions about just general protection for our workers, like will masks be available if we forget them or things like that, but also some questions about what the classrooms will be like. So can you talk a little bit about what your task force has been working on and what things might start looking like for when we return in August and September?
Sure. So the There is no set date for the transition to phase 4, and the governor will decide that per the Restore Illinois plan, which also kind of talks about what criteria needs to be met from a cases and capacity and a testing and a tracing capability standpoint. And so right now, based on some discussions that we're hearing, is that we can anticipate that phase 3 will be a 30 to 60 day or possibly even longer evolution. And so really, we're thinking about phase 4 in the August timeframe. Ideally, it will coincide or come before the start of the fall semester. And so if you look at the current published criteria for what is allowed in phase 4, and this is largely coming from the Restore Illinois plan, we will be able to have classroom operations of 50 or less. And that number is fluid. We've been planning for 70 or greater to be online, and that 50 number may become 70 or something greater than that between now and then. We'll see. But we are physically going through and making adjustments to the capacity of each space in the campus to kind of, especially the classrooms over the next month, to designate the classroom capacity. As you heard Dr. Barish mention, the 6 feet distance is critical. We view that along with hand hygiene and mask wearing as the most critical components of a safety plan. And so we will likely continue having mask wearing in our classroom spaces just to mitigate the exposure risk at the time. The whole testing and tracing environment we expect to be more robust. However, it may be more along the smart testing, as recognizing that we're still likely to operate on the grid system. There will be limited time to do anything significant in terms of cleaning and disinfection between class periods. And so we do anticipate having sanitizers available and hand wipes available. And I'm sure that some students and faculty will bring their own as well to wipe down the areas that they are going to sit and through the class in. But we will not have the opportunity or the resources to get all our building service workers through all the classroom spaces in that window between class periods. I think I got everything there.
Right, and I think that your point about it being evolutionary and that we're going to learn a lot in the next 30 to 60 days is a key part of this. And I'll go ahead and put in a plug for the today.uic.edu/coronavirus webpage, where we continually update information from you, from Janet, from Dr. Groden and others with regard to all these sorts of protocols for phase 3, as well as we unfold what will happen with the next phase. One of the other questions, John, that came up that is still in your shop is, what about transportation and parking? Can you tell us a little bit about what we're thinking, not only for phase 3, but maybe for the fall as well?
Sure. For phase 3, we recently announced that for June, parking will remain free, but we anticipate charging for parking come July. And our campus announcement will be released in the next 10 days or so, giving a daily rate structure that is less than what is currently is. And that will endure for the remainder of phase 3. We're still working the details of that, but people can anticipate to pay for parking if they need to come to campus for their work in phase, for the remainder of phase 3. For phase 4, since we're talking more normal campus operations, we'll have a parking rate structure, fee structure in place. It's still to be decided if there's going to be significant changes from what we have today. We are working with some carpooling companies and apps to see if we can partner with them to encourage more carpooling, recognizing that there may be a lack of a desire to continue using public transportation, or at least looking for alternatives to public transportation. And so we're going to try to assist with that. Our campus shuttle and night ride services we expect to continue in phase 4. to resume in phase 4, although it will likely look very different, very much like the CTA and Metro, where there's reduced capacity on our buses, more spaced out seating, definitely mask wearing requirements along those lines. And again, what was the second part, Teresa?
It was about our own transportation as well as parking, and I think you've covered both of those. Thank you very much. Let's move on to HR, because after the actual recovery and testing, I think we had quite a few questions with regard to HR. So we have Janet Parker with us today. Janet, can you help us talk about flex time? There's a lot of questions about what will continue to be allowable. Is this a university policy? Is it done department to department? A lot of people want to know how long we can keep flex time active, given some of the issues with either people with underlying conditions or people at home with underlying conditions, or if kids are not back in their own classrooms. So can you talk a little bit about how we're going to handle flex time moving forward?
Sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, I'd like to say that we did post some guidelines for phase 3 return to work on May 26th. It really talks about some of the staffing options, such as alternating days to reduce density and staggered reporting and ending times. The key consideration here really is consideration for health and welfare of your employees. So if you have been notified that you are to return to work on campus and have further questions about how that might be coordinated for your department, we really expect you to contact your unit HR person or central HR. But it's really been clear that telecommuting has been effective in most administrative areas of the university. And we're really working on improving the practices that we've learned as a model for certain offices where an on-site presence isn't really required. So the option to continue to work from home after the campus reopens in a more normal capacity will really be based on the business needs of each unit. Now, if there is an employee that is requested to work on site and they're in a high-risk group as identified for the Centers for Disease Control, they may request a reasonable accommodation, as the Chancellor had mentioned, through the Office of Access and Equity. And then related to the issue about employees that have children that are still at home, we're encouraging managers to allow employees that can successfully work from home to continue telecommuting. But when an employee's job doesn't lend itself to working from home, we really can't continue to pay people that need to be on site to perform their jobs. But there was federal legislation that went into effect April 1st, referred to as the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And that does provide for some emergency family medical leave expansion. And so if you do have questions about that, that's another area where we encourage you to contact your unit HR person or central HR. I mean, employees are eligible up to 12 weeks of leave, depending on the circumstances. The first 10 days are typically unpaid, but you can use your accrued vacation and sick leave benefits towards those first 10 days. The rules are pretty complicated, so if you do find yourself in that situation, we ask that you contact your HR representative.
Great, thank you, Janet. And following up with that, there were a few questions that came in about the fact that we are not using our floating holidays right now. We're not using our vacation time. And I know a message did go out about that. Can you just give us a quick clarification on how that will be handled by way of rolling over some time?
Yeah, well, first of all, there won't be any extension of the June 30th deadline to utilize floating holidays. But the announcement that went out last week related to how we will be able to carry over 5 additional vacation days, at least for academic professional employees. The normal maximum carry forward that we have is 48 days. So as of August 16th of this year, academic professionals will be allowed to a maximum of 53 days that they can carry on until August 15th of 2021. Of course, those 5 days are not compensable if for some reason an employee separates from the university. It would only be a 48-day max compensable. The maximum accrual limit for civil service employees, that was suspended, and employees are continuing to accrue additional vacation days. But no decision has been made as of today regarding when the accrual limit will be resumed or regarding the limit on the number of additional days.
Great, thank you. I know that the Chancellor addressed many of the issues raised in President Colleen's email that went out yesterday, and that's pretty straightforward. We know what we know today. Certainly, we are being cautious about moving forward in case the situation does change. But there are a couple of other questions with regard to immediate demands, and one of those is resources for our students, and it relates to technology. We have the Vice Chancellor for Technology Innovation here, TJ Augustine. TJ, can you talk a little bit about what we're doing by way of tech support for our students? I know a lot of it started back in March. How's it working for the summer, and what are the plans for the fall?
Yeah, happy to, Teresa. So what we started in March when the situation started was an effort to provide both laptops and hotspots for Wi-Fi access for all of our students who expressed a need in order to continue to take their classes remotely. That program is going to be continuing this summer and into the fall. Students who have a need can request them for the summer right now, and those needs will be met as quickly as possible. For the fall, students can also begin those requests now, and the equipment will be held until August and then distributed in the fall as students need it. I will add one piece, which was in the fall. It was a challenge to meet some of these needs just because there was everyone around the world was looking for this equipment, particularly the hotspots, and there was a backlog of this equipment, which led to some delays. But we've passed that issue at this point, and we have these laptops and hotspots in inventory right now on campus at a limited number, and we'll be able to meet the needs of our students going forward. And I can tell you right now that the web address for the students or faculty can direct students to is ACCC.uic.edu/forms/laptop request, and they can fill out the information needed to access those materials.
Great, thank you. And as long as we're on student resources, Rex, there's been a couple of questions about Fafsa and financial aid. Can you take a moment to talk a little bit about what's available to the students and their families?
So there was a question related to whether or not students and families could update their FAFSA that they filed if they've had a change in their financial situation. And the answer to that question is yes. Students and families can appeal, provide an appeal process. The form is found on the financial aid website. Please know that the website will be updated on June the 15th, and it will be more robust in terms of providing greater detail and direction to families seeking to have a change in status, along with all the other resources that are available to students that are provided through CARES as well as CARES through the summer. And of course, our students also have the ability to apply for assistance through 2 emergency funds that we're operating on the campus.
Wonderful, that's good news. Thank you. Chancellor, it occurred to me that we might have had several hundred people that joined after your opening statement, and we've had a few questions come in, again, asking about clarification on Tim's message, and then particularly with regard to furloughs and layoffs. Would you mind revisiting that for a moment?
I forgot to unmute myself. Well, that's a very reasonable question that everybody is asking, and I know this is creating a lot of anxiety. As you know, several flagship universities and academic healthcare systems by now, they have already implemented such measures, a number of them even here in Chicago. Right now, we cannot eliminate the possibility of layoffs, furloughs, and salary reductions, given the uncertainty we face with respect to the total revenue for the fall. But as I told you 4 years ago, when the same questions were raised during a meeting we had in the middle of the budget impasse crisis, this will be the last resort, and I hope we can avoid it this time as well.
Thank you. We hope so too. And Bob, back to you. You had mentioned a flu shot at the very beginning as well. And again, there's been a lot of people added and some specific questions about the flu shot and the importance of it. Will it be mandated? Will it be offered on the satellite campuses? How will we handle East-West? Can you just expound upon that a little bit?
Sure. So first of all, the flu shot is always mandated for those who see patients. So those who work in the hospital or see patients, it is mandatory, and in order to actually see patients, otherwise you won't be able to actually provide care to those patients. I think the question about the flu shot I often get is how effective is it? How do we know? And remember, the flu shot that we'll receive in the fall is being developed from what we see in the Southern Hemisphere. So we take our best educated scientific knowledge and look at what's happening here and develop the flu vaccine based upon those strains that we're seeing in other parts of the world now. And those are the types of the developments of the flu shot when we receive that in the fall. So we won't know exactly how effective it is actually till we give the flu shot out. But people ask me all the time, oh, I'm not gonna get the flu shot, doc, because last time I got it, I got the flu. So I'm not gonna get it. So that's a little bit of a wives' tale. You know, the flu vaccine is going to be a dead virus. Almost everybody's going to be getting. So why might you not feel so well sometimes after you got the flu shot? Well, sometimes you get some redness, swelling around the area, little what we call muscle aches and pains. Sometimes you may have already been developing the flu when you got the flu shot. Remember, it takes 7 to 10, sometimes 14 days for immunity to develop from the flu shot. What's sad is in the country, only less than 50% of people eligible to get the flu shot get the flu shot. When you get it, you are protecting others, just as you are doing by wearing a mask. You're doing your part to help the safety and health of the community. Now, in the outlying, the campuses that are not part of Chicago, we have recommended to their healthcare providers, to their hospitals, that they get the flu and they get it early, the flu shot, and they get it early. Remember, you can get the flu shot many places, not only your provider, not only here in Chicago at UI Health, but you can get it from a Walgreens, a CVS. I'm not picking anyone in particular, but remember that there are many, many places that you can get the flu shot. So in summary, we'll know how effective it is sometime later in the late fall to winter time. Please get it. You're not going to get the flu by getting the flu shot. You're protecting others, and my gosh, if COVID comes back at the same time as the flu, we're all going to be in trouble, and it'll help your providers sort out what is what, whether you have the flu or COVID-19. So that'd be my advice.
Bob, thank you for that. And again, there will be additional detail on that when flu season is here and the shots are ready to go out. So we encourage everybody to keep an eye on that information. We're getting a lot of follow-up questions, but we do have one more tranche of questions that came in as part of the early Q&A, and those are really about academic affairs. And since we have the Provost with us, I wanted Susan to up from our faculty and staff. Most of them are about plans for the fall and online instruction. And the gist of the questions are about support for faculty. Can you talk a little bit about what the plans are for over the summer and what you're hoping to see from all your planning when it comes to fall instruction? Oops, we need to unmute you, please.
You'd think after 3 months I would remember to unmute myself. But anyway, good afternoon. So I've talked about this a lot. For faculty teaching classes asynchronously with more than 70 students, as the Chancellor mentioned, we have hired about 100 GAs to be course builders to work with those faculty over the summer to help build the asynchronous classes. It takes about 12 weeks of about 8 hours a week to do this. And so we provided a lot of other resources as well. We also have instructional designers in ACCC who can provide assistance to those faculty and to all faculty who are creating online classes over the summer. The best way to do this is for departments to invite the instructional designers to a departmental meeting or of a smaller group within the department. Where the designers can provide consultation to a group of faculty and answer questions. And that's because we don't have enough instructional designers to be able to have them do one-on-one assistance throughout the summer, although they can do it in some circumstances. There's also a host of resources on my website, which is just provost.uic.edu, and on the ACCC website, including how-to webinars. The ACCC staff is also going to be holding office hours. I believe they have already started all summer long, and you can sign up on the ACCC website to meet one-on-one with somebody on the staff to answer your questions on Zoom. As I mentioned a minute ago, my website also has a growing list of articles about online teaching for those who are just interested in the difference between synchronous and asynchronous, and also tips for building community online. And the list of articles and all these resources are continually growing. We're adding to them all the time. All of my emails to the campus are also up there that explain all of this, along with a presentation I made about the fall teaching plan a few weeks ago in a forum a little bit like this.
Great, thank you. And this could be for you or for TJ. We did have a couple of questions with regard to what the classrooms tech will look like, if we're going to be making any adjustments for recording live classes or projecting live classes. Do we have any idea yet what might happen in our actual classrooms this fall?
You want me to take that, TJ, or do you want to take that?
Why don't you go and I'll fill in any gaps.
Okay, so first of all, the classes that are going to be live are going to be a lot of science labs, and all the classes that are going to be live came to us from the colleges and departments. We asked, what are the classes that you think need most to be live? So they're mostly science labs and some studio art and a few other music classes and so on. Those will be live. We're also trying to have one freshman experience, one first-year experience on campus for every first-year student. So those will be live. And once we completely set up and into classrooms that are properly distanced, we will go back to the colleges and ask them. We'll tell them what kinds of classrooms and what size we have left, and then ask them for the third group of classes that they want to have live. And that should all be completed by July 1st. Now, even the large lecture classes that are over 70 students and will be asynchronous online, those may very well have labs that are live, and they also may have discussion sections that are live. As far as the technology in the classroom, our plan is to record all live classes for students who cannot come to class, or for international students. Again, as the Chancellor mentioned, some classrooms have lecture capture, very easy to do. Some have other technology in them, and some don't. So we're going to try to add the technology that we can over the summer, and to the extent that we cannot do that, we'll have to figure out other ways to record them, possibly audio recording them, or video recording them in some other way. So that planning is still underway.
Great, thank you. TJ, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think Susan covered it perfectly.
Great. Then the one last question, Susan, is about that that incoming student experience that you referenced. And we had several questions with regard to when will advisors know what the class schedule looks like so they can make some recommendations to students, and how will an incoming student really understand the importance of this one on-campus experience at a minimum, and what kind of messaging can we send to our incoming students so that they know all the efforts that are being put forth for them?
Well, again, as was mentioned earlier, we're just limited by our footprint and the fact that, we have to do distancing, and you lose about 2/3 capacity of a classroom through the distancing. So that gives you a sense of how limited we are. Nevertheless, especially for first-year students, we just think it's very important that they create a connection with the campus, having never been on the campus, for school. And also that they have some opportunity to build a connection with each other live. And so that's our reason for putting them on campus, to try to get every first-year student to have an experience on campus. And when I say first year, I mean first-year undergraduate. We had some questions. We're not talking about first-year graduate students here, although they may very well also have an opportunity. we hope to have all of the schedule completed by July 1st. And then we will let students know, both incoming and continuing students know which classes are live and which classes are online. And we also will know, to some extent, which ones will be asynchronous and which will be synchronous. Although anybody teaching online a class that's under 70 students has a choice whether to go synchronous or asynchronous.
Great, thank you. So we've been getting a lot of live questions, many of them asking for additional clarification. So I'm going to go back to some of those to just fill in where some people had some more questions. And one of them is back to the parking and transportation, and it's about CTA. Susan, I know you had volunteered to take a stab at answering something about the CTA. Did you want to take that one now?
Yeah, sure. So I know that there's been a lot of concern among students and faculty and staff about the CTA and coming to work on the CTA. And the CDC did not help us the other day by discouraging its use. I'll remind everybody that that's still, we're still more than 2 months away from the beginning of school, so we don't really know what the situation will be. I was at a meeting today with representatives from the other Chicago universities, as well as representatives from the CTA. We had a really terrific exchange. You know, I can say one example was, they said, we asked about face masks and what the rule was going to be, and they said, well, we're going to recommend it. And by the end of the meeting, they had said, no, I think we're going to require it. So we had a very good interchange there. We let them know what our issues are. I'm putting together, I've already asked the registrar's office to put together the class schedule that we're going to have with a number of students that we expect to have at each hour, because there are a lot of issues of riding peak or off-peak hours. So I just want to say that we are now working with the CTA. The CTA was very, very open. I feel quite assured that they are doing a very good job of cleaning. If they require masks, we also suggested that they put dots on the in the cars to help people see distancing. They've already planned to put the dots on the platform where you wait for the. So they're really developing a lot. And the other size with them, and several other of the representatives did as well, is they really need to have a public relation to let everybody know what they're doing. Because I think a lot of the anxiety about using public transportation right now is because we don't really know what their plan is and what they're doing. And similarly, they have plans for the buses as well, which I won't go into now, but I will update you more on that as that goes on. But I was very pleased at their openness to speak with us and work with us.
Great, I'm glad that you're at that meeting today. Thank you for that update. Joanna, I had a clarifying question with regard to using research funds for acquiring PPE. Can you explain to us what's going on with that?
Well, I may give that to John. Honestly, I don't think yet that PPE qualifies as a research award related expense, but that may change. And then I'll throw this to John for very specific questions about accessing or distributions of PPE.
Sure, thank you, Joanna. So we're providing general PPE requirements, so like the mask, whether it's a surgical mask or a cloth mask, we intend to provide to all employees. However, if the research has unique PPE requirements, then definitely the research should buy it, or the department should provide all that information, or sorry, that equipment. But we do plan to provide the required for CDC or IDPH PPE for a safe workplace to limit COVID-19 exposure.
Thank you for that. Rex, we've had a couple of questions that are back in your court. I think a lot of people are just genuinely curious about how you're going to handle the residence halls. And while the Chancellor mentioned the auxiliary services, the residence halls seem to be a hot topic. Can you tell us a little bit about what the plan is there?
Sure. We are planning to have students in residence in the fall. We still have a few hundred students who are currently living with us throughout the summer. We are implementing a de-densification plan for the residence hall. We do not anticipate having any students or any more than one student per room. in the residence hall. We have made plans to do additional cleaning while limiting our public spaces, lounges, as well as limiting guests to the residence halls. So we have all those plans in place. We're still working with students regarding accommodations around roommates and so forth, and trying to assign those close in proximity in the building, though they won't be able to live together in residence. So that's the planning that we have so far. We're going to be extending our move-in window in order to give students a longer window to move in the halls so that we can reduce the amount of congestion that would typically happen on move-in day. So that's some of the things that we're doing. In addition to that, there was a question related to dining. Dining services are open on campus and will be open on campus for students, faculty, and staff who are returning in the fall, with all appropriate physical distancing and cleaning guidelines and protocols in place.
Great, thank you for that. And still in your court, there was a question about the new billing and payment plan, and that was supposed to start this fall. And the question is, will that still be happening?
That will not be happening. That has been delayed. So students will be held to the same billing plan as they had before, and billing and payment plan as they had previously.
Great, thank you. John, I'm going to come back to you with some more sanitizing questions. Lots of questions looking for a little bit more detail, or at least I think some confidence in the frequency and the depth of cleaning that will happen in public spaces, lobbies, restrooms, handrails, elevators, all of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're planning, not only for phase 3, but certainly for the fall?
Sure. So we're increasing the number of shifts for our building service workers, and so we'll have building service workers in the fall on site from 5:30 a.m. until 1:30 a.m. And their task is to do cleaning and disinfecting of all the common spaces. The bulk of the deeper cleaning of classrooms and common spaces and entryways will be done prior to the bulk of the campus population coming to work or at work. And then during the normal working hours when the campus will be most dense, our building service workers will be out and about continually wiping down those high touch surfaces, whether it's elevator buttons or doorknobs or push plates or handrails throughout the common areas of the building. We're also, and of course, hitting the restrooms as frequently as possible. The goal is at least 3 times a day to go through all the restrooms, and depending on the volume of business they're getting, it could be more. Water fountains, reception areas, classrooms as much as possible, as well checking on supplies for hand sanitizers. There will be lots of hand sanitizing stations throughout all our buildings, predominantly at the entrance areas and in the elevator lobbies. So there'll be ample opportunity for folks to practice good hand hygiene, as well as our building service workers should be very visible, actively cleaning surfaces.
Great, that's helpful. And I know because I'm on at least a couple of the task forces that there's still, there's a lot of really great planning going on. And I think that we'll be in, you'll see a lot of activity once we all finally get back to campus. Still in your court, there was a specific follow-up with regard to parking. Beginning of phase 4, do I have to pay for parking in July? Can you, again, just to expound upon that a little bit more in terms of what the parking plan is?
Sure, great question. I apologize for not commenting on this when I addressed the topic, but we recognize that there's a lot of monthly pass holders that will continue to be working in a telework fashion throughout all of phase 3. And so we do plan to have options available to continue suspending the monthly parking fee if that is the case, or to have a reduced daily rate if there's going to be sporadic, 1 day a week, 2 day a week kind of requirement to come to campus. And so we will have our message will talk to all of that, where there's options to maintain the monthly parking, convert it to daily, or suspend it in its entirety. And that we plan to lay that out clearly in the next 10 days or so.
Okay, great. And while I have you, can you just, not everybody is aware, I think, of all of the planning and structure that's been put in place. Can you just talk a little bit about the organization that you've set up and how various departments, units, and colleges have representatives that will be well positioned to answer some detailed questions on a department or unit basis?
Sure. So we've engaged the entire campus community to help develop what we call our building safety plans. And so each college and unit has multiple representatives that have been tasked to kind of develop these building safety plans to capture the workspaces and make sure they're adequately prepared for the work that's ongoing. The work is predominantly focused on phase 3 operations right now, recognizing that phase 4 is still a little fuzzy as to what the requirements will be. So there's been a tremendous amount of energy focused on preparing for research, as well as the health science colleges preparing their workspaces for the return to operations. And so there's probably about 40 or 50 building safety plans that are being finalized right now, and we have a team to review and approve those plans, and then make sure that all the measures that are articulated within those plans are being followed. We'll be doing, our environmental health and safety office will be doing random inspections to making sure that those measures are in place. Our building service workers and zone inspectors, zone managers will be out and about actively checking on things to make sure that the common spaces where we have the bulk of our hand sanitizer product and the cleaning requirements where most of the activity will be is all being taken care of. And then we'll routinely meet with the various departments and units to make sure that they understand the requirements for the other areas that are more departmental focused.
Great, and I don't know if this one is for you or for Rex, but there is a question about all of the food service, the commercial food service on campus, coffee shops, grab and goes, other places. Can you tell us what the plan is for those come the fall?
I mentioned just a second ago that we plan on having all of our dining locations open on the campus with the appropriate protocol. So they will be open. We've continued to operate in phases 1, 2, and 3 because we've had residents on campus. So those can expect to be open and ready for business.
Great, thank you. I'm going to quickly just take a quick scan here for a moment. Thank you so much for all of you who are still with us and who have submitted so many questions. We have a few left. I think that we've covered quite a bit here. I know, Janet, you were looking just to make a clarifying statement about the difference between operating and capital budgets. Do you want to take a moment just to broadly address how that works for us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I know that several people have indicated that we've got a capital appropriation, and why can't we use that to cover some of our operating budget costs? And the capital budget that we received, it has several reappropriations for new UIC facilities as well as repair and renovations. Those capital projects are intended to span over the next 6 years. And in fact, the last year that we received a capital appropriation was 2010. So some of these projects have been reappropriated more than once, such as the Advanced Chemical Technology Building that was originally appropriated in fiscal year 03. And we've yet to see that funding. That said, the money for capital projects is not directly appropriated to UIC. The state sources, as well as issuance of bonds to fund capital projects, and those just can't be used for operations. So when and if those funds are actually released, the construction projects are managed by the State of Illinois Capital Development Board to assure that those funds are only used for the designated purpose in the capital budget bill. So, I mean, we recognize that's a lot of money, but we simply don't control that funding and or the release of that funding. And those funds just can't be used by UIC for general operations.
There we go. Sorry about that. I am muted. Provost, there were a couple of questions about, who's participating in the planning and whatnot. And I know that you've got a very robust task force put together. You want to tell us a little bit about what you've been doing that got us to this wonderful point of doing all this planning for online learning?
Yeah, so we have the academic planning fall academic planning task force. And it has representatives from all the colleges plus several other folks on it. We've been meeting now, probably about 2 months, 6 weeks or so, and we broke it down into three subcommittees. So one subcommittee was looking at the question of what classes should be live and what classes should be online. And they've done fantastic work in not only figuring that out and helping us ask the deans and department heads about their preferences, but also working very closely with the Office of the Registrar to help create the schedule. The second subcommittee is answering the question for the classes that are going to be online, both synchronous and asynchronous, how do we support the faculty? And so the hiring of the graduate students, all the resources that I mentioned earlier, a lot of that has been brought out to the front by that subcommittee. The third subcommittee is dedicated to getting the student perspective. So that subcommittee has analyzed the survey that we took during the last couple of weeks of the spring semester, but they've also run a series of focus groups and asked students very specific questions about their preferences. And in fact, that is the place where we learned most strongly about the hesitation about the CTA, and are therefore trying to address that. The one thing I want to add is that the second subcommittee, which has been working on the resources and the hiring of TAs and so on, of graduate students, they've now turned their attention a little bit towards a different question about online resources, and that is, how do you build community in an online environment? I sent an email out and mentioned this a week or so ago, and we're really thinking hard, and I've just done some reading myself about this, both for synchronous and asynchronous. How do you connect to the students, and how do you help the students connect to each other? And again, these are resources that I am now putting up on my website, and I think there's a lot of them also on the ACCC website. So the community building and how to have online education as UIC, looking at our values and making them come through of diversity and access and equity. That's what we're working on now, and are hoping to provide a whole lot of resources to all the faculty about that in the coming weeks.
Wonderful, thank you very much. There's actually a couple of questions in my area with regard to communication that I'll take a moment to address. And thank you for asking about how we're communicating. As everybody knows, there have been dozens of emails sent out over the last 2.5 months as we have addressed the coronavirus pandemic. We have done things as much in real time as possible to keep everyone informed of not only what the information we were getting from experts in our resources, but also what our steps were to address shutting down the campus in such a rapid period of time. In addition to sending out all of those messages, my staff did set up an email, a webpage, today.uic.edu/coronavirus, where we've organized all of the information that has been made available. So there's a one-stop shop to be able to find information to the questions that you may have. That webpage gets updated regularly, and we've even now included a new stamp for the Road to Recovery, where we've got additional information. There are, of course, other resources like the Provost webpage, like ACCC, Student Services, and others who have additional information. I encourage you to go to the today.uic.edu regularly, as well as to some of the other resources. As for using some alternative medium, we are using Zoom, and we've made a great deal of use out of this communication platform. This is, I think, our 5th or 6th town hall that we've done to help get the message out to people about what we're doing, and we've done these intentionally so that they could be in real time and conversational, and we will continue to use this moving forward. We've also done a lot with social media and using our YouTube channel, and we will continue to do that as well. As always, we welcome input and feedback from people. You can send that to pga@uic.edu. And I always encourage everyone on Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock, Today comes out every week. And there's not only good features on there about good news happening on campus, but we also have important messages there as well. I will now wrap up my part and the open Q&A. Oh, wait, there might be more questions. I'm sorry, while I was speaking. Give me a moment. About that. There's a question here about students taking synchronous and asynchronous classes each day, and so commuters. And so we're going to have an interesting different dynamic of students on campus. And the question is wondering where can students go if they're going to be getting online asynchronously or trying to get on synchronously if they're either in transit or somewhere else on campus. Rex, can you help address that one? It seems to be a space issue.
Yes, I can speak to a portion of it. TJ may have to address the other portion as it relates to the labs. As far as the student space, because of the anticipated mass gathering needs in the fall, we are looking at converting some of our meeting room space in order to help provide spaces for students, because we had a lot of conversation regarding this very fact that if a student has classes that are back to back, they're likely going to be on campus. And we heard this from our undergraduate student government town hall as well. So we're making those plans. The Commuter Resource Center will be available for students to be able to use as well, but also expect that other facilities in Student Center East, Student Center West. We also had some conversation about using some of the larger ground floor space at Campus Rec to be able to provide some resources and spaces for students to be able to study in a very physically distanced way. So we are looking at that and plan to have those measures in place for the fall.
Teresa, can I add one thing to that? We're also going to have spacing, of course, in the library where a lot of people study. The other thing that happens when you move, smaller classes into larger rooms is that you empty out a bunch of rooms that become no longer useful for classes. So a classroom or space that would hold 20, 30 students, it's really not useful anymore for a class. And so those spaces, one of my committees, the first subcommittee, has been talking about utilizing those spaces and making them study spaces for maybe 5 people or something like that. And so all be mapped out by the time the semester begins. Looking at other spaces like the forum and other places on campus that we might be able to utilize part of for part of the time for study spaces. So we're very well aware of this issue. Of course, if it's an asynchronous class, you don't have to take it right then on campus. It's really the synchronous classes, online classes, that we're concerned about if they immediately proceed to follow a live class on campus. So we're working on this.
Let me add one really quick thing that Rex mentioned, which is the computer labs. One of the things that we implemented this spring has been a virtual desktop that all of our faculty and students have access to. So if there were programs that students were particularly going to a computer lab in order to access, they can now access through this virtual desktop on their own personal computer. And so the need for accessing of the computer labs for the software that's there will not be an issue any longer. We're working on, to the point that the Provost and Rex addressed, we're working on ways we can make the labs accessible with distancing restrictions and cleaning in the fall, and those plans are still being developed this summer.
Great, thank you. Everyone, this has been terrific. We've gotten through an enormous number of questions that have come in, and we still have over 14. Chancellor, I'd like to hand back off to you now because you had asked to be able to provide some closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Teresa, and thank you everyone for staying with us for an hour and 20 minutes now. Before I say a couple of words in terms of closing, I want to make sure that everybody knows and is invited to participate in an event that is co-hosted by several organizations on campus tomorrow between 12 and 2 o'clock. It's a meeting through Zoom, and what the organizers want to do is give everybody the opportunity in the space to reflect, to discuss, to heal, and to act on the recent events that have taken place after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And this is the first such event campus-wide, and we're looking at what other opportunities can we provide and what else needs to be done and how can we contribute as a university. Going back to the long discussion that we had and reading some of the questions that they were coming in the Q&A, it is obvious, for all of us, this is a very unsettling period, and many of you want to know details. You want to know exactly what's going to happen, and I think you're referring to phase 4 primarily, what's going to happen in August, how we're going to be in the corridors, how we're going to be cleaning the washrooms, and so on and so forth. These are legitimate questions. I can tell you the bottom line is that we don't know right now. There are a lot of things that they are uncertain. There are a lot of things that need to be worked out, and we have a couple of months to work all of this out. We even assume that we're going to be in phase 4 by August. As Dr. Fauci said in national briefings in the last few weeks, the COVID-19 virus may have a different timetable than ours. So as a result, we actually developed several alternative contingency plans in order to make these decisions. Technology, as I said at the beginning, and as Dr. Barish mentioned, is evolving. If we have a saliva test that can be obtained and can be analyzed quickly, that changes the entire situation for testing, for massive testing. If there is going to be further development in terms of our understanding of the transmission of the virus, in terms of understanding the interaction with flu, right? That's another potential game changer. So there are a lot of things that we don't know. Every time that we are certain, any time that we have concrete and significant information to communicate, we have done it. And we will continue to do this. And I very much appreciate the suggestions that they have made, because they were questions, but they were suggestions in essence, on the way that we should be communicate. Can we use alternative media to email? Well, that's one of them today, right, that we're using. Don't ask me to start Twitter in the middle of the night, especially. But we will find ways to communicate, and we want you to stay tuned and stay informed. Once again, thank you for everything that you have done, and thank you for joining us this afternoon.